Hello, fifth graders, and welcome to Language Arts for today. Today, you will need your copy of Little Women, your language arts materials packet, your white binder, and a pencil. If you need to pause and go get any of those things, please do so now and then come on back. So, fifth graders, today we're going to take a little break from reading from our text, and instead we're going to be working on, this objective I know looks like a lot of the objectives we had while reading, but again, we're going to be identifying theme evidence, but more specifically, we're going to be doing so in the form of this themes chart. So this was one of the things that you picked up when you came to get your quarter two materials. So I recommended that you put it into your language arts materials packet or your language arts binder. So hopefully you did that because you're going to need this. And we're going to start working on it. So I'm going to flip you around and then we're going to kind of get into it. So this should look like and kind of remind you a little bit of our chart that we used for Gilgamesh, where we were keeping track of heroic characteristics. Except for this time, we're going to be keeping track of themes. So I tell you to use the chart to track examples of specific textual evidence that relates to the story's theme, and I ask you to include page numbers. And I'm going to go ahead and say, again, we want to work on providing quotes to support these themes. Quotes and page numbers, okay? So I'm going to guide you through like what we work with Gilgamesh, some of this, and then some of it you're going to be working on for homework. So as we're looking at these themes charts, fifth graders, I'm trying to be prudent, which partially, includes not spending more time than I need to doing hunting. So I know that I've done homework assignments in which I've been reflecting on things that are evidence of themes evidence. And so prudently, I want to start by filling in as much as I can based on work that I've already done for my homework assignments. So I'm thinking about chapter 1, we actually didn't reflect on themes evidence at all, but I'm thinking of chapter 2. And the second question for chapter 2 asks, what did the March girls do with their breakfast? Which you'll remember that their mother encouraged them to share their breakfast with a family who needed it. And then question 3 asked you what theme this might relate to. And hopefully you'll remember that we talked about the theme that this might relate to being the importance of living a virtuous life, okay? The importance of living a virtuous life. And in this chapter, we I pointed this out when we were doing our reading, that there was this moment in which the girls came back after sharing their meal, and it expressed that they were really contented and happy after sharing this. And so as I think about this, the importance of living a virtuous life, why is it important? We see that as the girls are doing this, are showing their virtue, their justice to another family, it actually helps them to be feeling contented and happy themselves. So I'm looking at page 24 here. So you can go ahead and open to page 24. It's probably about 2/3 of the way down. And what we see here is that the narrator tells us, I think there were not in all the city 4 merrier people than the hungry little girls who gave away their breakfasts. And I love this quote as a way to reflect on, why is it important to be virtuous? We see that there is a certain, not maybe pleasure, but contentment or happiness that can come from doing a kindness for another person. So I'm going to write that quote down. And again, remember, if I have it, you should have it, so you can be working along with me. I think there were not in all the city 4 merrier people than the hungry little girls who gave away their breakfasts. Which again is on page 24 of our text. So remember, as we're going, if you need to pause to get caught up, that is just fine. So again, in my attempts to be reflecting prudently on these themes, I look at chapter 3, and this is the chapter when Meg and Joe go to the dance or the party. And we spend a lot of time thinking about Joe in particular and the way that she responds to society's expectations of her. So this is chapter 3. You can go ahead and turn to chapter 3. And I'm kind of looking at page 32, just a place to start. There's actually tons of evidence from this chapter that we could select. And I'm looking about halfway down on page 32, and this is the conversation between Meg and Joe where they're reflecting, or they're talking about the gloves, right? And Meg's like, you can't go without a glove. And Joe says, then I'll go without. I don't care what people say. So this reflection on Joe's expected to wear gloves. So I'm going to set it up and then share Joe's quote. So how were women expected to act? We would say women were expected to wear gloves. And then our quote here, then I'll go without. Says Joe. I don't care what people say. And this is on page 32. And so, fifth graders, as you're selecting a quote, it's good to give a little bit of context here, right? Women were expected to wear gloves. Otherwise, this quote might seem a little bit confusing without that setup. So, when appropriate, it's a good idea to include this so that when you need to look back at this, you can have a little bit of an idea of what this is talking about. Okay. Okay, I'm looking at chapter 4, and yet again, there's another question in here about themes. Remember, Mrs. March tells them a story, especially on this particular day when the girls were kind of, I guess, whining, for lack of a better word, about all the things that they didn't have, that they couldn't do, that they were unhappy about. And so she tells them this story with a moral after she was asked. So on page 51 is where I'm looking. Very top here. The end of the story, actually even the bottom of page 50, we see one discovered that money couldn't keep shame and sorrow out of rich people's houses. Another, that though she was poor, she was a great deal happier with her youth, health, and good spirits than a certain fretful, feeble old lady who couldn't enjoy her comforts. A third, that disagreeable as it was to help get dinner, it was harder still to go begging for it. And the fourth, that even carnelian rings were not so valuable as good behavior. So they agreed to stop complaining, to enjoy the blessings already possessed, and to try to deserve them. So I am going to select that very end part, right? This idea. And again, there's a little bit of maybe not agreement at this point, but Mrs. March, their mother, certainly seems to be trying to impress upon them this idea that no amount of money can keep them from sorrow and sadness and pain in life, and that happiness comes from somewhere else. So, speaking of so they agreed. And of course, remember, you should still be working along with me. To stop complaining, to enjoy the blessings already possessed. This is on page 51. Oops, I forgot complaining. To stop complaining. right, fifth graders, and as I look at number 5, there's not an explicit question about the themes in that particular chapter. But so now we've kind of addressed all of the themes that are actually in or that are directed by actual questions. But I still think, as I kind of am thinking through this chapter, the chapters that we've read so far, that there certainly are more examples available to think about these things. So I'm thinking a little bit, the first thing that comes to mind is the relationship between money and happiness. And we actually talked about this in chapter, not chapter 3, in chapter 5. As I was reading, I was reflecting out loud about the description of the 2 houses. I don't know if you remember that, which is on page 52. So go ahead and join me on page 52. So we see this on the other side of the fence, that is, there is a stately stone mansion. And it goes on to tell us, right, there's comfort and luxury and lovely things and rich curtains. Yet, it tells us it seemed a lonely, lifeless sort of house. So again, this idea that there is this beautiful house, but it doesn't necessarily make it a happy house. So I'm going to kind of use an ellipsis, the ... to help to set this up. On the other side, was a stately stone mansion. ... Yet it seemed a lonely, lifeless sort of house. On page 52. So again, the narrator seems to be agreeing a little bit with Marmee here, that maybe wealth doesn't necessarily bring happiness. I often, while reflecting, I think when you think about the societal expectations of women, certainly Jo comes up a lot as one who seems to have particular struggles with it, which of course, but I do think it's interesting to watch Meg as well, because Meg seems to want to try to meet these expectations. And I was thinking of the narrator and what she said. We kind of talked a little bit about how she was being a little bit of she was kind of joking a little bit when she made the quote about, but yet we must be elegant or die. I'm trying to find this quote on page 33. On page 33. Okay, so this is all about Meg's slippers are too tight and Jo's hairpins are poking in her head. Okay, so I'll write this part in my own words. So Meg's shoes were tight. Jo's hairpins hurt. But then our quote. But, says our narrator, dear me, let us be elegant or die. On page 33. So again here, right, this reflection that it doesn't matter if there's pain or discomfort, right? Instead, really, they are expected to do this regardless, expected to do this in a way that is helping them to be elegant or die. And of course, the narrator is kind of making a little bit of a reflection, a humorous reflection on it. So we're going to do one more together, and then I'm going to have you finish the remainder on your own for homework. So we're going to work on trying to find this last idea about the importance of living a virtuous life, which there's a lot of different examples for it. But I'm thinking about one of the ways in which we see that the girls showed kindness to their mother. This is in chapter 2. and how they're all thinking about how they want to be kind to their mother and give her presents that help her to feel loved and cared for, and how they go ahead and do that. And I'm thinking of Amy in particular on the top of 23. Or what is she reflecting on? Join me on 23. So she says, "Don't laugh at me, Joe. I didn't mean anyone should know till the time came. I only meant to change the little bottle for a big one, and I gave all my money to get it. And I'm truly trying not to be selfish anymore." Okay, and we'll use that. So I'm going to say Amy reflects on herself and says, "I'm truly trying not to be selfish anymore." On page 23. And again, her reflection is here trying to think of others, right? She wants to think of others. Good. Okay, so fifth graders, you'll notice if you're looking at your week at a glance that I said to complete the starred portion of your themes chart, which currently is not starred. Okay, but we're going to star 1, 2, 3. You're going to add a quote for each of these as you come through. So I'm adding quotation marks here as a reminder to you that yes, you should be providing quotes. And also remember, you should have a page number. So I'm adding this as well as a reminder to add a page number. So you have 3 pieces of evidence that you're going to provide yourself, and then you're going to submit a picture of this whole thing. I want to see all 9 of these. I want to see that you were working along with me, and then also see what you come up with as your new examples. So as we're coming through, I think there's a lot you could think about in terms of Jo in particular and society's expectations of her. I think that you could be reflecting on a lot of the girls' behavior, but Marmee certainly, Mr. Lawrence certainly, Beth certainly. There seems to be some reflection there about virtuous living. And I think chapter 1 certainly has a lot of the girls kind of reflecting on this, the issue of wealth and the issue of money and how it affects them. Okay, so those are just some hints. You can get your evidence from anywhere between chapters 1 and 5. So really up here, we should be looking just from chapters 1 through 5 for this evidence. So you don't have to get it from the places where I hinted at, but it wouldn't, if you're feeling stuck, that's a good place to start. Okay, so 5th graders, again, you're going to fill in those last 3. You're going to support it. If necessary, you can include a little description of what the context is for the quote, like the one that we did for our first societal expectations of women. If you have questions, if you're not certain what to do, of course, reach out. I look forward to seeing what you come up with. Good luck.